I wonder what you're thinking.
I don't think you'll take up too much room in my Stanley steamer.
Maybe you're all right.
You think you can hold that thought all the way to the coast?
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Jessa Robuck, who is the CEO and co-founder of VidaLuz Development, which is an organization that's looking to develop sustainable properties and microcities. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Jessa, your team is relatively kind of eclectic, right? You have folks that are farmers, background, others that have background in hospitality, residential and commercial developers, as well as wellness experts. Can you tell us about yourself as well as your co-founder and kind of the nature of this kind of eclectic composition of the team?
Sure. Yeah, it's a very ambitious business model. So we have talent from all over and all different walks of life. So it's all just assembling the right team and the right people to help us accomplish these ambitious goals. As far as myself, my undergraduate degree is from LaSalle University. I have a BA in English and a BA in biology. Went back and got some post-bac certification as a non-drug holistic health practitioner from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And in the meantime, I have really been born and bred through hospitality, everything from ownership to consulting to running large-scale operations to I just recently came off of a large-scale hotel project, a hotel startup project, as well as being a senior vice president of administration and then senior vice president of operations of a restaurant development group as well. So eclectic background myself, but it gives us all a wide range of experience.
So what is VidaLuz and what are you looking to achieve?
Sure. VidaLuz, what we're trying to achieve is access to sustainable lifestyle and sustainable choices in a community and access to nutritionally dense food as a basic human right. So our ambitious model is really combining a lot of different areas to create these comprehensively holistic communities that give people those choices to live a life that has a positive impact on the world. So we combine residential that is built from net zero modular factories with retail and commercial spaces built in the same responsible fashion that have a small business incubator component to it so that we're helping build the local economies. We have a central marketplace that serves as a community gathering, but also doubles as an education center. We also incorporate a large-scale agriculture program, vertical farming, and the whole community is tied together through efficient renewable energy microgrids that provide independence and responsible energy consumption throughout the communities. Also providing sustainable amenities like scooter shares and car shares, just being able for everyone to walk through the community and really choose a sustainable lifestyle.
So I want to kind of break it down for the audience a little bit. So if we could kind of explore a bit. So I think there are some standards that are out there like LEED Platinum Green building, for instance, and they of course account for very much kind of a similar overlap: solar panels, passive renewable energy, for temperature control, charging stations, again, fairly common these days. Radiant heating, natural insulation, shading techniques, of course, ventilation, convective cooling, just better materials, right? Material science aspects, as well as just better design. So a lot of these things, and of course, integration of IoT and data for the management of just kind of basic fundamental aspects, that's pretty much kind of starting to, I think the standards are there already. So, kind of the delta you're talking about is the vertical indoor farming and its own kind of decentralized grid system. Again, these models, I think, have been, I would say, successfully been in existence throughout the world to some extent. How is this fundamentally different from a business model, from what's already out there, let's say in UAE, outskirts, other parts of Europe that have really started to do this on a large scale?
Right. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're not inventing any new cutting edge technology here. What our uniqueness is as a company is it's that holistic systemic approach. Big thinking creates big change. So there's in the sustainability and green world, there's all of these separate silos that tend to act independently and not necessarily comprehensively communicate. I'll give an example. Boxed water. I was just reading an article about boxed water. While the thought behind it is incredible and great, let's have a little bit more efficiency in our recycling. There's a lot of recycling plants that aren't necessarily outfitted, don't communicate with that. So their efficiency as far as recycling boxed water can be 17 to 19%. So we're losing that comprehensive approach when we don't talk to each other and combine aggregate all of these technologies. So that's really the uniqueness of VidaLuz, is it's this comprehensive aggregation of all of this sustainable technology. So yes, microgrids exist, but do they exist with an approach that decentralizes big agriculture so that people have connectivity to food and their own supply chain? And it's also, combining it with IoT and responsible data aggregation throughout the community and communicating that to the consumer in a responsible way that encourages continued sustainable behaviors. So, how are we pulling all this data together? How are we approaching water conservation, renewable energy, and doing that in a way that the consumer recognizes their behaviors and is encouraged in good habits? So it's really about pulling all of these different components together, doing it within a community setting that encourages that behavior, and then translating it through educational programs as well. And then also, the community at large. How are we attacking food deserts and food scarcity issues in inner city environments? So it's really about helping in so many different ways this community and connectivity piece as well.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of merit to what you're saying, and certainly there's a tremendous amount of synergy. And fundamentally, it's the ability to have decentralization. Being able to do everything from local manufacturing, local retailing, local sourcing, local urban farming. So all of those are, I think, fantastic. It just, when you look at it from a project and program management, because you have so many facets, it can be fairly complicated or complex. So I wonder, in trying to integrate these capabilities, how is that, really adding to the complexity of the project itself?
Well, that's where we really attack the challenge of data, right? How are we aggregating data? How are we analyzing data? How are we presenting it to the consumer, but also for our own business purposes? How are we increasing our efficiencies over time? So it is, again, I keep saying it's an ambitious model. It is. We're tackling so many different things, but the imperative need for us to address development and change these consumptive patterns and reinvent them into something that's entirely sustainable and positively impactful upon the planet. The need is so imperative that we really have to be ambitious with how we're attacking it. So again, how are we integrating all this? The strength is in the data. It's in that IoT, IT approach where everything has a sensor attached, everything communicates to each other, with each other. So being able to create this comprehensive system that aggregates it all, that pulls it all together and effectively analyzes it. We're very, very lucky that we have some incredibly strong partners that are helping us to do this in a way that it's seamless and smart city integrated, but these new components that we're introducing, like agriculture and water conservation and on-site water treatment, non-potable water treatment plants, introducing all of these new elements in ways that they might not necessarily have had the connectivity before, being able to forge the way and pull all of this together in that one big picture approach. I think, again, that it's both our challenge and it's our strength and our uniqueness as a company.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about a very interesting subdivision community called Lake Nona in Florida that I've visited before. And they have some pretty ambitious projects, especially in collaboration with some, medical types of oriented healthcare big giants. And that includes catering to the aging segment in terms of data collection. So when it comes to data collection, certain things seem like they're fairly, kind of agnostic and shouldn't really be personalized. But in fact, we could actually get a lot of insights about the usage of, the number of flushes, the number of times they go to the gym, to the kinds of food they eat at the cafeteria or shop. So how do you balance the data aggregation and insights of that community relative to the needs of the privacy of the individual?
That's a huge challenge too. Privacy is a massive concern, especially with responsible data and the amount of data that we're talking about. Again, it really comes down to the strength of our partners and making sure that we have the right protective measures in place. In addition, creating an option that, we talk about this onboarding process per se, when we bring people into these communities. When they choose to buy, there has to be an entire onboarding and education process about what technology options are available to you. What do you want to opt into? What do you want to see? What visibility do you want to have? So it's really this interactive experience where we have to also rely on the consumer as well as educate the consumer so that they have an understanding of the purpose of collecting data and how we're applying it and how it helps to create a better world by making informed decisions as far as our improved efficiencies as well. There's multiple layers to it. There's really no simple answer, but between responsible partners, making sure that we have those right privacy settings, educating the consumer, and having some opt-in features that they can say, yes, I want visibility on A through Z, or I want visibility on A through C only, and the rest my name should not be attached to it, and give me some privacy in that.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to the onboarding aspect and the education for just a second, but I want to go back to the urban farming. You mentioned vertical farming. So are we talking indoor? Because I think pictorially it was depicted as rooftop farming. If you could just kind of elaborate a little bit in terms of that.
Sure. One of the great things about our model is that it's adaptable and scalable. So VidaLuz communities, these micro-cities, these eco-agro micro-cities and holistic wellness eco-agro boutique hotels, these placements can go anywhere in the world. So how we scale and adapt it really is native to that particular environment. So as far as farming specifically, to hone in on your question, we're looking at a myriad of different available agriculture techniques that we can employ and incorporate within our communities. So in an urban setting, that looks like vertical farming, and it gets very tall, right? Because, property is a little bit more scarce. But if we're able to do something urban or a rural placement, it's totally different. We can incorporate regenerative farming. We can incorporate limited livestock. We can incorporate aquaponics, aquaculture. Honestly, it's really about creating an ecosystem as best as we can within these communities from an agriculture perspective. So, what you saw is that vertical farming, that's an urban placement. We're looking at, maybe 5 to 6 floors, some rooftop farms and farm area and greenhouses, as well as being able to employ different and growing environments on each floor. For example, our mushroom growing room and area has a totally different climate and environment than our root crops or our leafy green crops. So it's being able to control the environment so that we have really efficient farming techniques that we're able to incorporate into the city.
Okay, and I've seen similar types of models, and I think one of the things that they're challenged with is really relative to the yield to the residents' needs in terms of ratio, what that actually looks like, and in fact, it really is more of a nice to have. It's great on a brochure, but really they still need to shop at a grocery store, have it deliver. What's the kind of percentage of foods that's going to be realistically be grown on site?
Well, We have, again, that also depends on placement too. For example, like grains, that's not something that's easily vertically farmed, right? So if we have a rural placement and we can actually have some acreage to dedicate to grains and livestock, our percentage of efficacy as far as providing food to the community increases. In an urban environment, we're really looking at what grows good vertically. So we are limited in that aspect, but again, that's also the purpose of the marketplace too, is to pull in local farms and local purveyors to be able to supplement what our own program inherent to VidaLuz isn't able to provide. So, it's kind of a sliding scale, the placement and that adaptability factor of the agriculture program. But, we're looking at anywhere between 40 and 60% that we think is a baseline to be able to provide to the communities and also the surrounding communities, because vertical farming is hyper efficient. So we'll actually be able to surpass in those particular crop areas, far surpass the needs of our individual community.
Mm-hmm. And I think vertical farming tends to kind of lean towards more higher premium products, whether that's herbs or in some cases, unfortunately, marijuana. Let's talk a little bit about the future of cities. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are focused on urban, but again, it changes depending on the areas that you guys are developing. So do you also get into kind of the suburbia as well?
We do. Again, it's a very adaptable and scalable model. We think about what efficiencies we can use in what locations. For example, a coastal application, we're looking at pulling energy from wave and tidal movements. So like that's a particular thing for a coastal application. In Colorado, where we're looking at Site 1, it's going to heavily rely on solar. Thank God for all the wonderful sunny days that we get here. But then go into the Pacific Northwest and it rains all the time. You're looking at a totally different energy profile. So there's a certain amount of customization as far as placement, but as far as an urban placement, it's more dense and vertical.
Yeah, gotcha. Makes sense. So going down the more dense urban kind of format is that, we're starting to see that the way people interact in a kind of a city center or smaller city is changing. So meaning that, let's take the example of retailers. Retailers are, for the most part, really literally going belly up because they can't compete with the e-commerce giants. And with things like autonomous cars eventually becoming more ubiquitous, you're not going to have a need for parking spaces, as an example. So there's some fundamental shift that's happening from a kind of a urban landscape and design. Can you talk about your thoughts around some of these kind of cross-sell, tendency of some of these different services? And in fact, that model is going to really work. Although we have seen, retail mixture of retail with living spaces, but again, because of the large movement away from retail, I'm just trying to understand, how viable that's going to be.
Right. So those shifts, especially throughout the course of the pandemic, have been very apparent in our model. It's really important to become agile and to adjust to the market accordingly. So, we talk about parking spaces. We just had a conversation about this with our Chief Development Officer this week. There isn't a need. And honestly, as a sustainable community, we don't want a huge footprint for parking spaces. We place our communities transportation adjacent. So we place our communities next to train stations or bus stations or bike paths, or as many of those as we can in combination. So our initial location, we're right next to a train station and right next to a bike path. So the need for cars, we want that to decrease, and we want to be able to provide car share programs within the community, scooter share programs, bike share programs. Alternate transportation methods are so important to the future. We have to reduce the amount of cars on the street. So it's part of our mission. This is the future of what cities look like. We have to reduce cars and car usage. And as far as other pandemic shifts, our commercial space and retail space that we originally had planned looks totally different today. So it's minimized. People have co-working spaces that, it's not about density and being able to be around all these other people. So our co-working space looks entirely different. It's much smaller and it's more privatized spaces. People want to feel safe and secure. And then there's also this huge work from home component. So it's more important to have the technological connection for people to be able to attend Zoom calls versus to be able to have executive suite offices. So, executive offices, large commercial rental spaces, that's really pulled from the model or drastically reduced. And then as far as retail spaces, we went from these big anchor rental spaces that we originally had plotted and shifted more towards a micro lease model. It's about the small business owner and how do we help them and how do we help them grow in order to contribute to today's economy. So smaller micro leases with a small business incubator model where we can reduce rent in exchange for smaller equity pieces of companies in order to help grow them and support them with our network of resources as well. We just want to be able to stabilize and build economies versus build giant empty spaces that businesses just frankly aren't moving into right now.
I want to go back to the complexity and just to kind of level set this properly is that let's take a solar PV install or small grid, or just even the building permit and the construction process alone. But when you layer so many different work streams, it becomes so complex. I mean, you're managing so many threads of project management activities, and then you layer in the different functional aspects like capital structure, engineering, design, permitting. It becomes quite hectic and chaotic. And then the customization or the localization. So, northwest is going to be fundamentally different from south, east, and north, east, and then certain parts of international is going to be very different. So how do you manage all this complexity and how do you ensure that you're able to de-risk at every stage of the life cycle?
Sure. So I'll kind of separate those questions. How do we manage this type of growth? Number one, it's about putting the right team on board from the very beginning and incredibly educated people, as well as extensive partnerships with companies that have years and years of experience of doing different components and then executing them at a high level of what we're talking about as far as aggregating into one location. So it's the right partnerships, it's the right people, and it's also building the foundation of the company the right way from the beginning and leaving space for research and development and innovation as far as our capital stack. We know that what we create today, city number 1, iteration number 1, is not going to be micro city number 10 or micro city number 20. We know we're going to improve over time. And again, that's an advantage for us that in a way we're creating our own market segment so that we have the ability to define what that looks like now. So if we do it right from the beginning with the right people and the right team and the right, I can't stress enough how much human capital is so important in this equation, but also the right partnerships and other established companies, it gives us a footprint for growth, which to us right now, it's exponential as far as placements and the desire for people to see this come into the world. Another component to that is that we are mission-based. We're unapologetic about the fact that we want this to be a profitable model, but on the other side of that, we have an advantage of being a mission-based company that there's a massive amount of passionate people that want to see this happen, that want positive impact for the world. So when there's mission and there's passion, there's increased drive and motivation for success within the company as well. So it's very advantageous for us that we're so desirous of seeing this end result of these sustainable communities that really make a difference. And then, I'm sorry, your second question was?
No, I think that was terrific. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I think just to be very clear for the listeners is that I think they know that how enthusiastic and such a big advocate of this towards this movement. I think the issue that I'm really bringing up is this notion of being a first mover. So if you look at the kind of the smart city or sustainable city movements, whether it's in Saudi Arabia or parts of Europe, for instance, I mean, we're talking, double-digit, triple-digit billion-dollar type of scale to kind of make these things happen, especially if you're trying to get into legacy city, newer development, newer cities, satellite cities that you guys organize a little bit different. So I think if you look at Tesla as an example, for it to get to where it is and where the large tier one automakers are starting to get into EV for decarbonization, it's taken almost a couple of decades for Tesla and others to really trailblaze that. And to your earlier point, there's a ton of education costs, ton of marketing, and then they bear the blunt of the product development aspect. So that's really the question I think I'm asking is, is your organization best suited to undertake this major offering, or should it be a larger, property developer or in conjunction with the PE instead?
That's a good question, and I don't necessarily know if there's a concrete answer to that. But what I can say is that the people that are larger developers out there that have developed massive amounts of property throughout the world, they're still doing it in the same way. So might they be better equipped than a new startup like us? Sure, absolutely. They have years of experience and a massive amount of resources, and we're pulling all this together as a new startup. So from that standpoint, yes. But we have the advantage of thinking about this in a very different way and being look at this through a light that, it doesn't have to be the same way. It doesn't have to be consumptive construction just because that's what you've always done and that's what all your resources are used to. So, I'll liken us to Airbnb in the sense that, people were renting out rooms forever before Airbnb came along and aggregated it in a way that was consumer friendly, using data and using it in a very smart and friendly platform. I think that we're not inventing anything new. We're not inventing a microgrid. We're not inventing a smart city. All of these things exist. We're just thinking about it and implementing it with a conscience that we want to be able to hand a world over to our children and our grandchildren that's better off than where we're at today. So for us, it's just a different approach. It's just about changing the psychology of how people are approaching development and implementing this sustainable conscience in decision making and in process and in how you're building your company and in ESG and how you're pulling a team together. Everyone has to care. Everyone has to believe in that mission and vision. And that's the difference for us is there's just this shift in our psychology and how we're approaching it that, sure, a giant developer out there might be better suited as far as their current equipment, but it doesn't mean that we can't get there. And it doesn't mean that we're not hardworking and passionate enough to accomplish it as a team.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Absolutely. I think there are certain demographics and certain generations that are much more willing to pay a premium for sustainability and eco-living in this kind of context. And I think one of the questions that I have for you is, from a market fits, again, I know that, Denver is kind of closer to your backyard, but should you be looking in Europe or places where they have much more receptivity and have some of the infrastructure already laid to support something like this?
Mm-hmm. Well, kind of speaking to one of your previous points, Tesla, taken them so long to get where they're at today. We realize a 20-year, 30-year plan. We realize that this is going to make an impact over a long period of time, and it's not going to change overnight. And that, for us, it's about being that ripple of change and that agent of change. Are we looking at international placements? Yes, absolutely. If the opportunity presents itself and we're there and capable as a company, we will certainly take that opportunity. But domestically, we're seeing the same trends in Gen Z and millennials. I've seen everything from 74 to 85% preference for green and sustainable buying options in the market today over an option that isn't sustainable. So we see those preferences. These are also generations that are set to inherit a massive amount of capital from parents and grandparents over the next couple decades. So this is the future of buying domestically as well. We're just going to see this emerge more and more and more. We're also seeing these shifts in impact investment and sustainable investment initiatives within large companies. Look at the BlackRocks of the world. They have these massive initiatives shifting towards green building and sustainable initiatives and green energy and renewable energy. And the list goes on and on and on. And they realize that this shift is so important because it is the future. So, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're already seeing these trends come out very predominantly. So for us, it's just being at the cutting edge of it.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing with us your purpose-driven, mission-oriented organization. And again, I think this is a general direction. And I want to wish you all the best. With that, I've been joined by Jessa Robuck, CEO of VidaLuz Development. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you so much.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.